The drawings that I have on the screen up here, these are from a book called Drawn to Life. Walt Stanchfield's a series of notes. Walt Stanchfield was an animator over at Disney, and he did a drawing and training class. Really, for animators, it was action analysis was the class that he did. And the action analysis has a long history over at Disney. Walt Disney actually hired Don Graham and some other teachers to teach there full time and developed a study of action analysis to break down what it is to actually go through the movements for animators. It makes a lot of sense for them. And I sat in on a lot of the classes. I drew in a lot of these classes, and for the first 8 or 9 years I was there, and so it was really good to go through this. Very, very different than my training. It was very different than my training. And in fact, when I first went into the class, I would do these drawings that were more finished and more illustrative, and Walt would just look at him and shake his head and walk away. He just totally rejected me. And I was like, outside of the studio, I had accomplished some things, but when I got in the studio, it was like, this sucks. And he was just like pretty clear about it. And so it was great. It was great to go through that process. But as you can see on some of these, it really makes you think about the front, the side, the top, what's actually happening in 3 dimensions around the figure. Today, we're going to look at a lot of weighting and directional forces. And directional forces that, they might be caused by what the model is doing, or the positions of their arms or legs, or direction of their head to their body. All of these things are going to add to these kind of directional forces. And I'll demonstrate some of those. But there's some really good examples here in this. You can take your time and look over some of these too. But you can see here the drawings in the left column, and then Walt's drawings, or his suggestions, are the third ones. Okay? So they're in the third column over there. Those are his suggestions, like with the arrow going to the guy's hip, and so on. So, where the first drawings, they look like they're a little bit stiff, and Walt's drawings were far more gestural. They aren't completely anatomically correct, but they don't appear that way in your first scene, because he's moved things to make the read clearer. But you can draw into these, and you can even draw a skeleton into these afterwards. You may change the proportion of the head to the figure or something, but for the most part, they're pretty clear. There's a couple of clear examples. And you can see from the drawings on the left to the drawings on the right, you can see that the suggestions are really capturing more of the expression of what's really going on. And when you do a drawing, it seems to be much more compelling when you look at the drawing, and you can actually possibly get a sense of what the model is thinking or feeling. That's very different than just a nice rendering, to actually kind of draw an emotion from that drawing. That's a really, really unique thing. And, and it requires the model to project, and it requires the artist to really tap into that, so that there's a real understanding, a real feeling going on that's relating. Here we can see, again, this is really a case of really showing the action, getting into the action, and seeing the action or the dynamics of each of these poses. You can really feel the weight. You can feel the stress on the drawing on the right. The one on the left, top left, is quite blocky, but Walt's drawing on the right, you really feel that there's a real reach for it. And then down below, there's some really nice examples of weighting and how the model might be standing and understanding that. I put a number of animation poses. Milt Kahl and some of these other guys. You can take a look at some of these. I'm just going to spin through some, but the poses are like real life for these characters, just caught in action. And you can see the extremes from the raised eyebrows up, and what makes the feeling of surprise here. And watch the next drawing. His head is tucked into his shoulders, his brows are down, his chin is up, and his face is kind of scrunched. So to make things clear, there's a real strong contrast. And you see it more clearly when you see these drawings in contrast to one another. Like his head is down below his shoulders, his cane is down, and then all of a sudden his head is up, his arm is up above. We see the difference there. And then extremely high there. This is what I would call kind of these forces. Now, in this character, his arm raised up like this, his clothing is going to fall down his arm based on that reach or based on that stretch, that directional push up. His clothing is going to react to that. And so that's one thing that we're going to want to look at, because if you get the force right, then the fall of the material feels right. But it starts with the force. It starts with what is bringing your arm up and what is making that, basically what is causing the reaction. Okay? So your body is going to cause a reaction. The folds are going to be the reaction. The wrinkles are the history of where you've been. So this is all in telling of the story of what we can do. It's all information, every bit of information. But when you break down the information into the marks you're putting down, you have to look at it and say, okay, what are the marks I'm putting down? What's the purpose of those marks that I'm putting down? Or what is it that I'm telling in those marks that I'm putting down? Okay? Okay, here's some directional forces as well. Okay? There's a straight line in here, and the straight line is from Philip's left hand to the bridle on his horse. That's the straight line, okay? And it's a pull, and that pull has a reaction. The reaction is part of the bridle and part of the neck of the horse, and the ornament on the front of the horse across his chest and his legs are all subject to that force. The Philip's cape swinging back towards the front of the horse, again, that's all subject to that one pull of that rope. Okay, so when you look at the dominant directional force, everything's going to fall from that. Here's a few drawings in succession that you can see a strong difference. His chin is pulled to the left here, and his head is tipped to the right. And now his chin is pulled up to the right, and his head is tipped back to the left. It's all telling the story. It's all of those shapes are telling something. And you can see these. You can go through these more on your own and take your time to look at these. But even these are broad. These are broad expressions. We can look at any of the model poses online, and you can look for the range of expression in those images, and then push it a little bit. Okay, it's like a fishing story. It's always better when the fish is a little bigger than it really was, right? Well, you want to do that with your drawing too. Okay. All right, and this is a beautiful example of the force. Now, Aurora is twirling around, and you can see from these images, look at the change of shapes that happened during this twirl. And you can tell, well, she's pulled up and where she's relaxed, and her hair gets pulled up and relaxed. Okay, still swinging around. Her hair is continuing to swing. Where she's settling, her hair is still swinging, and then it settles down. These are some drawings with Roger and Pongo, and I wanted to show this. This shows really good both weight. You can tell he's centered over those 2 feet, right? And then the directional force of the way he's pointing. There's some really good examples. And take a look at the the stretch of the force of that arm pushing down. And then there's a little bit of an action going there. Look at the change. Now the force is up his rib cage. He's pulling his rib cage and his shoulders up, and Pongo's going down. And now there's kind of a reverse. And now it's really stretched up. They're both stretched up. Okay, so now you really see a strong directional force of the two of them, and then they're getting together in here, and then they resolve. They're floating and starting to come down. A little bit more action. And coming down to settle into this. And then he's back out. His arms are back out again. Okay? So this is what I mean about like directional forces. With any pose, you're going to have kind of a mainstream directional force and weight. So we want to look for both of those things. You know, how are they weighting? Where's the most of the weight distributed? And then, you know, what kind of other forces are happening there within the pose?